Brew Strong is brought to you by Blickman Engineering, home of the Riptide. Visit them online at blickmanengineering.com.
Brewers, it's time for the beer radio you've been looking for. This is the show that dispels myths, tackles the toughest topics, and makes no apologies for geeking out on beer. Hosted by two guys that drink before they think, Jamil Zainasheff and John Palmer. This is Brew Strong.
Hey, howdy, hey, my brewing brothers and sisters.
Greetings, cretins. Good to be back.
Yes, it's good to be back. Good to be live again.
Yes, yeah, we haven't been live.
We weren't live. Now we're alive.
Yeah. Yes. Thanks to the vagaries of Microsoft, we figured that out and we're back on. And
the addition of my friend Travis telling me something that I should have already checked myself.
Yeah, it's good. A good thing you have a computer expert nearby.
Right. Somebody who uses computers.
Yeah.
I plead the fifth. I refuse to assist in most cases, so please don't repeat that.
Right. That's one thing I hate. I hate it when people ask me for like computer help.
Yeah.
It's like, you're a computer guy. It's like, yeah, but I don't want to help you. Sorry.
I refuse to be held liable for any future meltdowns.
Right. It is not my job. It's somebody else's job. There are people hired to do this. People do this for a living. Why don't you engage one of them?
Every year around tax time, I get a phone call from my sister asking me how to create a new folder for the new year to put her invoices in. So I have to walk her through creating a folder.
Can't just tell her to go buy some manila folders and stop trying to do it online?
It amuses me.
That's good. It amuses you. My mother-in-law, who's 96, a few years back, Liz is like, she wants a computer. I'm like, well, I'll tell you what, I will give her a computer. She doesn't need to buy one. I'll give her one. However, she can never ask me any questions about computers or using computers, any of that. I don't want to ever hear a question from her on this. I said, you will have to be the IT person that she goes to. And it's like,
good call, actually. Yeah.
I mean, I don't want to speak ill of the woman, but the number of calls Liz gets about, the TV doesn't work. It's like, well, did you push the button on the remote? Yeah, it doesn't work. And Liz will have to drive down there and push the button on the remote, and sure enough, it works. It's like, don't know why, but when you're 96, you've seen a lot of technological change.
Yes.
So, and we jest about this, but the day is going to come where at least I don't know about you guys, but I'm going to be that one that's like, I don't understand how this works. I can't make this work. I'm going to be calling my daughters to help me with some piece of technology. There's going to be something new, some, plasma based anti-gravity something, and I'm going, how do I do it? And there's going to be like, just turn the knob, do this. And I won't be able to get the holograms to work, talk to them. I'm like, I'll have the hologram upside down, it'll be they'll be looking at the back of my head. They'll be like, Dad, turn around. They're like, what?
Yeah. I am very curious about what that technology is going to be. I am curious about that.
Well, it's going to be something that is so beyond what we know today. Yeah. And our ability to learn is going to slow down, and quickly adapt to this stuff. And we will be completely lost.
Yeah.
That's
It's going to be
why
like,
you gotta
no,
be
Dad,
nice to
you
your
don't
kid.
put it in your ear. You put it in your nose. And it's like,
Right.
what?
Like, what? Look at him. He's putting it in his ear. How do I hear? Oh, gotta be that way. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
But you know who I expect would be able to keep up with technology, no problem at all, no matter what it is. Who's probably be inventing that technology, at least when it comes to brewing
Right.
related.
Right. Our good friend John Blickman.
That's right. Our dear friend John Blickman. He's going to be on the cutting edge for forever. And that's what he does now. He's making great brewing equipment. BlickmanEngineering.com. He's been innovating your brew day for decades and has really come up with a lot of cool things. So check him out, BlickmanEngineering.com. If you enjoy the show, he has been paying for this since we started. And you can tell him thanks by sending an email to feedback@BlickmanEngineering.com. Go straight to John. And you can tell him what you think and hopefully say something nice. So there you go. Today, we actually going to do another Yakima Chief interview, but we already did one a couple of weeks ago, and then
somebody
failed to hit the record button. Somebody screwed up. I don't know who that was. And so we were going to do that today, and then he
got
couldn't
called away.
So we're going to do some of your questions that you send in abundance to us.
Mm-hmm.
Making our effort we're only 50 shows away from catching up on all the questions. 50.
Right.
A mere 50. And some of those questions, they're not really questions. So maybe it's 49 shows to catch up.
Unfortunately, we have Travis here to help us today.
That's right.
Well, my default answer is always, well, if you listen to Jamil and John. Yeah.
Have you listened to the show? Charlie asks, he's got some crystal malt questions. He says, hi, Jamil and John. I love the show. Very informative, but also extremely entertaining. The emphasis I put myself on extremely. I have a number of questions regarding crystal malts. This might be better suited as a show topic. Well, let us decide that. Let's see here. He is kind of breaking the golden rule of only one question per email. Simpler, but he's kind of got four, but they're all very tightly related. What blends of crystal malts do you use in your darker beers, stouts, and porters? What about in lighter beers such as IPAs, pale ales, and Märzen's? Does blending a lighter crystal and a darker crystal give you a medium Lovibond crystal? All right, you already got 3 questions in the first question. This is a question foul here. I think there's like 7 questions in this thing. 8. All right, let's take that one bit at a time. What do you use in your darker beers, Travis? Your stouts.
Right, various dark roast malts. Usually some dark chocolate. Depending on what it is, I mean, from RIS.
Specifically on the crystals.
Oh, crystals. Sorry, crystals in my stouts and porters. Very little. I mean, maybe something 40 to 60, just a touch of it, but not so much in the crystal. Thanks for clearing me up on that.
Mm-hmm. How about you, John? Do you have any darker
same
with crystal malts?
I'll go up to 90, but I really don't care for Crystal 120 that much. I mean, I'll put it in like a Belgian double, something like that. But otherwise, yeah, I'm not a real fan of it. I'll use a little the 60 or a 90 in a porter or stout just to give some background sweetness. Right. When I'm judging beers in these categories, I'll often say to the entrant that there's like a third dimension kind of missing from this beer. You know, I'm getting the roast, I'm getting some hop, or I'm getting some base malt, but there should be like some background sweetness or another third dimension to really kind of round out this beer. Mm-hmm. So, but I use the 40 and 60 most.
Right. Yeah. You can use any Lovibond really, but Yeah, I tend to use the darker ones, the 120, 150, for Belgian beers, where you're looking for kind of that figgy plum,
Yeah.
dark, caramelized type of character. I've used it in stouts as well. I think 80 Lovibond, and it depends. If you're doing like a Russian Imperial, you can do more of that darker crystal.
Mm-hmm.
If you're doing something like a dry stout, you wouldn't use any crystal at all. So it varies. And sometimes you can use a little bit of lighter color crystals just to add a kind of a background. That's what you use in the lighter beers. You'll use 10 Lovibond, maybe 20 Lovibond,
10, 20, 40, just to get that edge.
Yeah, depending on what you're looking for, more caramel or just kind of a background. Bit of
honey, toffee, caramel. Yeah, it's increasing color.
Yeah. Does blending a lighter crystal and darker crystal give you a medium Lovibond crystal? What's the answer to that one, Travis?
Well, I always think of your story about the IPA. I think it was made in Australia, where he showed you his crystal malt.
Oh yeah, there was the Joe White chocolate malt.
I would say no.
It doesn't. They took like some black malt and some pale 2-row and blended them together and called that chocolate malt. That's not correct. So same thing on crystal malt. By blending 20 and 80 doesn't give you 50 or whatever it would be.
Right.
You can do that, but you're going to get the flavors of the 80 and the flavors of the 20, both present in smaller amounts than if you used, something around 50 Lovibond would give you that 50 Lovibond flavor in a stronger amount. So it's completely different. You can't really do that. Let's see here. What are the flavor differences between domestic crystal malts and English crystal malts? And what beer styles do you tend to use each in? John?
I have not done a side-by-side taste. I consider them in general to be more similar than not. Yeah, I can't point to a clear difference.
How about you, Travis?
Well, along the lines of what John's saying, it's not so clear cut, but I certainly have gone towards using the English in my my IPAs, whereas my black double IPA I use the American. I actually had a homebrew shop here that didn't want to sell any of the domestic crystal malts because they thought they were too sharp.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So they only sold the English crystal malts.
Mm-hmm.
And whereas the line is pretty slim, John, you're right. I find that the same thing. And so if I want something biting through my black double IPA, I go with the American.
Okay.
But for my West Coast, I've definitely gone all English.
Yeah, I'm with Travis. Personally, I see a huge difference between them.
Okay.
A quality British, crystal caramel malt has a richer, fuller flavor, sweeter, rounder, whereas the domestic varieties tend to be domestic in the U.S., by the way.
Yeah.
Tend to be, a little drier, more one-dimensional. They're good, but they're good for, American styles. The British ones are good for American styles too. But if you're trying to create a British beer, you've got to use British malts. There's just no substitute for it. There's such an important part of the flavor. A lot of the British yeasts really favor malt character instead of the hop character. And so, it's really exposing that malt bill, whereas a lot of the American yeasts favor a hop character and bitterness versus malt character. And so it's, neither one is, right or wrong. It's just that's the way it is. And so I think it's just critical to use the British crystal malts if you're trying to get that flavor. The same thing in Belgian beers. I'd lean heavily on the British malts as well. just because that's what they tend to use, and that's why you get some of those flavors versus. And there's also French and Belgian malts as well, German malts.
I think that makes sense when you consider that the base. I mean, these crystal malts are coming from the base malt, American two-row versus British pale ale malt varieties. So the fact that the British crystals would be a little richer, warmer, probably goes back to the base malt that's being used.
Yep, and the growing conditions.
Mm-hmm.
Where they're grown makes a big difference in the malts. For me, you've got to. Let's see here. Like his 12th question here. Which Lovibond or sources of crystal malts tend to age better than others? I've heard that domestic crystal 60 oxidizes faster. Now, are we talking about outside, before they're used in brewing, or once it's brewed?
Well, the perception is that 60 Lovibond crystal or caramel malt tends to go stale faster than other colors. And I don't know that there's been solid documented evidence of that. I mean, Charlie Bamforth has done some work with crystals and foam stability and so on. 60 does seem to be the bad boy of the bunch. Something about its particular Maillards lend itself to staling faster, but I'm not sure how definitive that is.
Well, I've read similar stuff about that, and I would imagine that it also depends on the maltster, because this is the reason why you get different flavors from different suppliers of it's 60 Love Crystal is not the same across 10 different maltsters.
Right.
So there might be some that are less prone to that. But that's one of the malts that gives you that, what people say, craft beer or home brew, staling. It really takes on, gives it that weird caramel flavor. Once oxidation occurs or staling occurs, it gives it that weird sweet caramel-y thing. So, got anything to add to that one, Travis?
Nothing at all.
Okay. Are golden naked oats considered a crystal oat? I've heard conflicting info on this. I've only used it in oatmeal stout. And what other styles would it be suitable?
I believe so. I think they are made with the techniques of making crystal malt. That is, wet stewed, converted in the hull during roasting. They're at a 10 Lovibond, I think. So a pretty low crystal, but
right. Yeah. So crystal malts are made, like John's saying, they get converted during the process, the malting process, and then they get brought up to temperature while still wet, and it starts to caramelize the sugars that are present. And more darker is where the Lovibonds come up, and they are still fermentable. At least some of the sugars are fermentable. It's surprising what will still ferment. Some of these black malts, they actually will ferment. You'd think, I always thought that they were dead, but that's how they make like Cinnamar. Black malt. They mash it and convert it and ferment it, and they get like a 0.4% alcohol out of it, and that's why it's Reinheitsgebot compatible, right?
I see.
Because it's actually just malted, and fermented. It's beer that you're adding. So there you go. That's actually why. And that's why these malts will still ferment. All right, let's take a quick break. When we come back, more of your questions right after this.
Hey, it's Kaylee Cuoco for Priceline. Ready to go to your happy place for a happy price? Well, why didn't you say so? Just download the Priceline app right now and save up to 60% on hotels. So whether it's Cousin Kevin's Kazoo Concert in Kansas City, go Kevin, or Becky's Bachelorette Bash in Bermuda, you never have to miss a trip ever again. So download the Priceline app today. Your savings are waiting.
Go to your happy place for a happy price. Go to your happy price, Priceline.
Are you looking for a simple brewing system that's great for all grain brewing, but everything on the market seems to be full of compromises? Blickman Engineering has the answer. The Blickman Brew Easy All Grain Brewing System. The Brew Easy is a complete system with easy upgrades and a beautiful compact design, perfect for any size brewing location. At its core, the Brew Easy is built on two gorgeous Blickman Boilermaker brew kettles, a high-temperature March pump, and either a top-tier gas burner or the new Boil Coil electric heater. The Brew Easy adapter lid allows the pots to stack on top of each other, forming an efficient, strong, and compact brewing setup that comes in 5, 10, and 20-gallon batch sizes. Upgrade your Brew Easy system with full automated control by adding a Blickman Tower of Power temp controller, and make moving around easy with the Blickman Kettle Cart. The Brew Easy is modular. If you already own a Boilermaker kettle, you can build your Brew Easy by purchasing just the modules you need. The new Brew Easy all-grain brewing system. See it today at BlickmanEngineering.com and brew with Blickman quality on your new Brew Easy.
Back to the beer guys that make other beer guys look like wine guys. Brew strong.
All right, we're back. We're here with John and I here, our good friend Travis Campbell, who's a award-winning brewer out of Houston, Texas. How's things in Houston? Sweaty?
It's surprisingly cooler lately. 70s a day, all day so far.
Oh, nice.
Is that the humidity or the temperature?
Probably both.
All right. Let's see here. Sean asks, he's got a rising pH post-ferment problem. He says, I have a weird situation. I made a pale ale with the following stats, and he gives us a chart of all his numbers here. He says, I am very confused as to why the pH has arisen from 4.44, which is still rather high, to 5.57. I don't think this is lysis, as I take very good care of my yeast, oxygenate, use Saccharomyces, etc. I'm very confused. Thanks, Sean.
Oh, did he say whether it was dry hopped?
Yeah, I thought that too.
Right, he did not. But there is the potential issue here. I'm gonna. So what I noticed is a couple of things. The timeline where it starts to where the pH increases is about 9 days out. It reaches its peak at 11 days out. The temperature it's sitting at is 73 degrees, a peak of 73 degrees at that time. 73 degrees Fahrenheit, 22.7 C is pretty high. I mean, the beer was finished probably, let's see here, where's the terminal gravity? Terminal gravity was
16.
Yeah, it was 16, and it was around 7 days or so. So one of the things is
it hasn't attenuated completely,
especially if you're running kind of hot. Well, and he also sent a follow-up email that said the yeast was the American Ale Blend 0060.
Mm-hmm.
I think the yeast are just either it's one of two things. Either he dry hopped it considerably, then that gave him this pH bump, or two, the yeast is dying and just barfing up a bunch.
Yeah.
I tend towards the latter in this case, although his pH is quite high.
Yeah.
I mean, it started at 5, which isn't too bad,
Mhm.
but it never really dropped.
Yeah.
I mean, it got down to 4.44. That's not terrible, but I would have thought starting at 5, he should get down to about 4.2, maybe.
Potentially, yeah. It's and he said in a follow-up email that there was no dry hops in this.
Oh,
So yeah, so it should be. It probably is all yeast related.
That's gotta be.
Yeah, low attenuation going from 55 to 16
Mm-hmm.
Expect it to be down more like 10. So yeah, it probably is yeast related problems.
Is it
Tell you my crazy
possible?
theory.
Yeah, go ahead.
My crazy theory. I mean, you guys can tell me how crazy it is. So I was reading up on 060. It's got some sulfur compounds to it. If the yeast cleaned up the sulfur, which this yeast doesn't look like it cleaned up much, could the pH rise as the sulfur's pulled out? How nuts and complex is that?
I wouldn't expect it to.
Okay.
Sulfur, unless it's sulfuric, usually doesn't contribute to pH.
Yeah, plus at 1016, you're not sure how much this cleaned up anyway.
Yeah.
Well, here's another question. Could it be that there was still considerable buffering to the water in the beer, into the wort that was produced? Could there be considerable buffering, which is why it never really dropped like it should have? And then
so a high alkalinity water.
Right. That, and as maybe the CO2 has left. Maybe there's some agitation that occurred, and we've lost CO2 from the fermenter. I mean, plus the high temperature, you're going to have less CO2 in there, and maybe the CO2 degassing has allowed the pH to rise.
Usually the pH, usually this carbonation only counts for about 0.05 pH unit.
I think I disagree.
Oh.
Do you remember our Australian friend who's the brewery consultant out in?
Oh yeah, yeah. Yep.
He was sending me pictures of degassed beers and their pH. I think, wasn't he? Was that what he sent me? God, my mind's terrible. And I think there was like a 0.3 difference, or it was huge. Maybe I could log into my email and pull this up. Let's see.
It's a solid point up, right?
Yeah. It went from 4 back up to 5, which is 100 times what I'm talking about.
So when he first sent this to me, I'm like, no, it can't be that much. Or he was checking, commercial beer pHs.
Mm-hmm.
And the preference people had for different pHs. And it was shocking what the pHs were. So a lot of them were extremely low. They were in the 3s.
Okay. For some sours and stuff, or pseudo sours?
Yeah. Huh. No, they weren't. And I was asking him, I'm like, hey, did you decarb these? And then I think we had a discussion about the level of carbonation and what kind of change that was. So you may be right. Maybe it's 0.05. I don't know. I wouldn't think it would be very much.
Yeah, that's
all right. B52 Brewing. Hope you like Sabro.
Oh, nice.
Well, we'll see. I definitely get the coconut in this one. Is it supposed to be hazy?
Matt would imagine.
It just says double dry hopped India Pale Ale.
And those guys don't dislike me yet, so I shouldn't make any negative comments, but I like the beer enough to send it to you.
Are they an East Coast brewery, Travis, or Texas?
Houston.
Oh,
yeah,
okay.
52 is Conroe, I think, a little north of me.
Okay. Well, Houston, that's east. So.
From you guys, yes, definitely east.
It's not West Texas, that's for sure.
No, it's not West Texas. That's
I
it.
think we sort of kind of answered Sean's question.
Mhm.
John Charles asks about the Aroma Show. He says, first of all, thank you for hundreds, thousands of hours of shows. It is in the thousands. That's pretty sure. It's at least, I think we broke 1,000 a while ago.
Yeah, I'm sure we did. And we'll never get that time back.
What I could have done with that time of my life. I've been
He was
listening
dead.
for years, and my beer has gotten much better due to your shows. I am on the quest for a perfect Helles. I can usually get the flavor dialed in, but the bready, doughy aroma remains elusive. When I have a fresh, real German Helles, not the American versions, it ranges from a noticeable bready, doughy to a big, doughy punch in the nose. I keep reading all sorts of things on using things like carapils, step mashes, both in the most recent issue of BYO, and decoction, all of which have been deemed useless by the Pope many times. Useless, I tell you, goddamn useless. I'd love to hear a show on aroma in general, and specifically contributors to non-hop aroma, toasty, bready, doughy, biscuity, and how to maximize that. Thanks, John. Oh, in case it matters, here's the system. 12 gallons of beer, all grain, no sparge, insulated mash tun, able to recirculate wort through a Blickman electric kettle to step mash, full wort boil, whirlpool with therminator to get to 44 degrees in 30 to 45 minutes, ferment 2 carboys, temp control via the side of the carboys in a chest freezer. Starter on a stir plate using the Jamil app. Start at, and see, I ain't getting anybody from those. I don't know who's doing those apps now.
Yeah.
Start at 44 to 46, free rise to 50, hold for 5+ days, then free rise to 60, 62, and hold. Then keg, cool, and CO2 carbonate. Have used White Labs 830, 833, and 838.
Okay. But no indication of base malt.
Right. That was the thing I noticed. It's like, well, you know, are you using like a domestic Pilsner, or are you using like a continental one?
That's the key. Yeah. You just don't get the big malty bready notes in domestic Turo that you do in the German malts.
Right. This is a case of, you know, you can pretty much make a great Helles just using Pilsner malt. And it's the kind of Pilsner malt you use, you know, the quality, the freshness, and then how you treat it through all the process. And fermentation, you know, fermentation is important too. But it sounds like he's doing all the right stuff, except, you know, maybe the wrong base malt, or I don't know. I mean, I find that you can get too intense a Pilsner character, and sometimes you need to cut it with some domestic two-row. Otherwise, it gets, you know, just over the top Pilsnery, and you start getting a weird kind of candy sweet character. You guys ever do that?
I have not. But
I haven't.
As much detail as he's given, it wouldn't surprise me if he's using a German Pils malt. So maybe try a different German Pils malt, or a few different ones.
Right. Yeah, he sounds like he's doing everything, you know, to the exact detail. All right. I think this is drinkable. It's got quite a bit of Sabro, but it's got a mint kind of character to it as well. You get that when you're doing... So one of the reasons I'm interested in Sabro is Travis was sending me beers, some smash beers that he did. And, you know, he was like, when we talk, he's talking about Sabro a lot and the coconut bomb that Sabro is. And it's interesting. And this is one of the things I asked Brian in our previous show that did not get recorded. One of the best show we've ever done in our entire lives. Bar none. Absolute gold. You know, I asked him about Sabro. That's one of their hops. And, you know, whether or not, you know, is it really... You know, does how the brewer uses it make such a huge difference, or is it that, you know, people are getting different lots of hops, different, you know, bales, different lots, and hops, the same hop when grown on a piece of property on one end versus the other, one end gets more wind or sun or rain, the other end of the property gets less. They may harvest it, not the whole thing, maybe, big enough that they don't get through the whole thing in one shot. So they harvest part one day and they harvest the other part another day. One day sitting can make a huge difference in the hops. So a lot of times they'll try and blend that together to keep it consistent, but that can affect it too. That's why they have, hop selection. They will give you cuts from particular bales and particular lots because they're different. It's just the way it is. It's like when you grow tomatoes or, Travis, you grow a lot of peppers. When you grow peppers, not every pepper, even on one plant, turns out exactly the same. Some are smaller, some are bigger. They'll have different flavors to them because, one's just maybe a little greener. It budded, a few days later. So it had less time. And, a pepper connoisseur such as yourself is probably going like, yeah, this one's, you can taste the difference. Same thing on hops. So I find that really fascinating. And I'm always curious with hops. Is it just the hops they got, or is it the brewers? I'm rambling on here because that's what I do. And when I was in Sweden for the conference there, in the evening, they had kind of like a gathering, and a lot of the local brewers, they all brought their beers out and were sharing them. It was really cool. And I was tasting the beers, and I noticed, a real problem with the hop character on all these, or a lot of them. And people tell me, oh, that's Citra. And I'm like, this ain't Citra. I've never tasted a beer with Citra that tastes like this. And what I found out was, they were getting really crappy Citra, maybe on some people it was the way they used it, but I think, the fault was in the materials that they were getting, because they had to go through back then, they had to go through like a third party broker that was just buying whatever they were buying and calling it Citra. And maybe it was Citra, maybe it wasn't, maybe it's something else.
2 or 3 years old.
It was extremely hard to get. Yeah. And there was no dates on the crop. It was all rebagged, and the person just said it was Citra. So who knows what they're getting. Fortunately, I was able to send like a pallet of Citra over one time. I should reach out to them again and make sure they got enough hops. Well, and what happened after that was, I know Crosby Hops, I put them in touch, and some of the others, they're all selling direct now to, countries like Sweden, instead of allowing middlemen to do it. So, there's good middlemen, don't get me wrong, but I'm sure there's some that are not quite so scrupulous, and hopefully they've gone out of business by now. But, and I will say certain brewers always had, great hops, like Thomas at Malmo Brewing.
Yep.
Hoppy beers were spot on. Tasted like, they're being brewed here in California. So, I don't know. So it always makes me wonder, is it the brewer? Is it the hops? But the way that they use this, maybe they used such an intense amount of Sabro that there's this mintiness coming through.
And one of the questions I had for Brian was regarding biotransformation on that hop, because I've had 2 recent NEPAs with Sabro with 0 coconut. It's like, where'd it go?
Right. Is biotransformation perhaps taking the coconut out or transforming it to some other compound? It's supposed to be linalool and geraniol that's getting converted.
Right.
Don't know what compounds make up that coconut character, but I really enjoy the coconut character personally.
Me too.
I think it's really cool, especially in like a tropical beer. If you're looking for tropical fruit character like passion fruit, something like that. If you have passion fruit and coconut, like hell yeah. All right, enough of my rambling. I've probably we're probably totally out of time now. My fault. We don't get to talk to Travis and John at the same time very often. Jimmy is asking about reverse osmosis water and storage in stainless steel. I remember back a while ago. Let's see. He says, "Hey dudes, enjoyed the recent brewing water episode." See, and this is only from January 2019. His email. It's quite recent.
Yeah, it is.
In our world of catching up on email. John Palmer mentioned RO water being corrosive to stainless and other metals. I'm just wondering how quickly it begins to corrode them. What would be the longest time RO could be in contact with 304 or 316 without causing any problems? Are there any metals that are safe to use in contact with RO? Thanks, Jimmy in Gonzales, Louisiana.
Okay. Yeah, that's a good question. I really don't have a number. The Corrosion Metals Handbook didn't have any numbers for that. But the issue with corrosion in stainless steel is usually chlorides. Usually it's chlorides in stainless steel that is the real corrosion problem. Right. In the case of reverse osmosis, you have no mineral in the water at all. So it's acting as a very strong solvent. It's trying to dissolve in solutes. And if you have a crevice or some discontinuity in your tank, an interface that could set up like a local crevice or geographic feature, that can start initiating corrosion.
What about the air-water interface?
The air-water interfaces.
See corrosion in stainless. People leave them filled with, water that has,
electrolyte
in it that becomes, acidic through bacterial action, and it eats away at the stainless right at that line.
Yeah. The water line is a definite crevice-like interface. So yeah, it's always going to happen at at a local spot where there's some electrochemical difference. Mm-hmm. And sometimes that can be like a fitting on the side of the tank or at the water line.
But can you store things like acid, strong acid in stainless?
Depending on the type of acid it is, yeah. I mean, some acids are reducing, some acids are oxidizing. Mm-hmm. Phosphoric you can store in stainless, no problem. Nitric tends to eat it away.
Mm-hmm. That one on Breaking Bad where they dissolve the body and a bathtub, probably not in stainless.
No, that would have been in fiberglass or enamel, which would have been more resistant. But yeah, I think they were using sulfuric. They did that on Mythbusters too. They use like concentrated sulfuric and a little bit of hydrofluoric to really dissolve it.
Since I have a brewery, I've got the perfect way to dispose of bodies. There's a man way on the tanks for a reason, right? Not so you can crawl in there. We're not supposed to do that. But if you're getting rid of a body, man way, you just push them in there. You start running some hot caustic for a while. Once you're down to bones, you switch up and start running some acid, and eventually you're left with like a handful of teeth. You crush those up, pour them down the drain, and let them go down the drain with all the waste, and you're done.
Interesting. Hadn't thought that through.
I'm thinking of my next business venture. It would have to be on the dark web, I think. I'd have to find the dark web first, and then I'd have to post, this service on the dark web. Yeah. And then I'd have to take like Bitcoin. Who wants to do that?
Right.
I guess that's where it falls apart. All right. So the answer is John doesn't know. Me, I'll tell you, you got about 24, 48 hours. Well, because I'll say this. When, the action will starts essentially immediately, but it's very slow and minor. It's the same thing, like I'm saying, when you have bacterial action and, some liquid in a pot goes sour.
Oh, right.
Air-liquid interface. It's at that air-liquid interface that it just starts etching away. And I've seen it happen in 24 hours. So I would imagine, I would not leave it for a week. It depends. If it was completely filled and there was no air whatsoever,
right,
you got a lot longer. It's that air-water interface is the real problem. But I think you're fine overnight. But you may start seeing lines where you let it sit. For storing RO, plastic.
Yeah.
HDPE, my friend.
Or simply add a couple teaspoons of, calcium chloride, calcium sulfate. Give it some mineral, and it'll no longer be RO,
That's
but
true.
it'll still be good for brewing.
You could adjust your water to a base water that you're going to use for brewing, that you always would add at least that.
Mm-hmm.
That's a good idea. I like that, John. You know who else I like?
Our friends AJ and
RJ and Josh.
They're RJ and Josh, yes.
Out near Reno. Wonderful folks at Brew Chatter. If you got questions about brewing, I tell you, and you can't wait for us to answer questions from 4 to 12 years ago, 20 years ago. I would suggest going down to Brew Chatter or give them a call, or emailing them online and ask your questions. Though smart guys know a lot about brewing, and they know a lot about customer service. They're just wonderful, sweet people that do great things to make your hobby more enjoyable. So check them out, brewchatter.com. All right, we're going to take another short break. When we come back, we'll have more of your questions right after this.
Learning to brew has never been so disgusting. This is Brew Strong.
All right, we're back. Paul asks about a heavy-duty orbital shaker dry hopping. So I don't know if you saw the video he attached to his email, but he's got like a really large orbital shaker that's got a 5-gallon carboy on it, slowly kind of oscillating around. He says, research says agitation increases dry hop utilization. He says, look at this beast. I need to brew an IPA to really test this guy out. He says, in parentheses, he says, I have this stout on cocoa nibs in secondary, so don't worry about the lack of cooling. I always control fermentation temperature to a T. You control it to an F or a C. I would not use T in your fermentation measurement. Well, does Paul have a good idea or not?
Yeah, I mean, I don't think it's necessary, but the studies on dry hopping do show that you get more effective transfer of oil and acid or alpha acid to your beer with agitation. And you can, I think, get the vast majority of your dry hop character in, I think it's 3 to 8 hours with utilizing agitation of some sort.
Right.
So if time is money, then that's good.
Well, and it's, so here at Heretic, we do about 3 hours. So we take the beer out of the bottom of the tank and we pump it back up to the top of the tank, and we run it for about 3 hours after dry hopping, and it makes a huge difference. And the value is not just time, but so if you look at all these studies on time and extraction, you will see that there are other flavors extracted over 7 days, right? Over the period of time that they tested. There's other spikes that occur. So it's not like, they say, oh no, you're getting all your hop character out, in 12 hours or whatever they say, right? Yeah, but you're leaving behind this other stuff that you'll get if you go to 7 days, or 3 days or whatever it is. Take a look at the studies; they're pretty interesting. But the question is, do you want those flavors? The modern brewer and the modern customer wants, just kind of the fruity, tropical, juicy stuff, and doesn't want any of those more, biting, piney, type of character, I guess.
Yeah.
So I find it really interesting that we're kind of skipping that part of it. But one of the advantages to doing it this short run is that you're extracting the hop matter before you get to that point where those other flavors start to diffuse into the beer. So you're extracting certain compounds and leaving other compounds out versus a longer time. And you can over extract too. Circulation can over extract. That's why they're like 3 hours, 4 hours.
Yeah.
I would highly recommend homebrewers try this out. I was not that big a fan of it, but I ended up implementing it here at Heretic. So if you you can get yourself a nice peristaltic pump, which is sanitary and does not add oxygen if you use the right tubing, and just dry hop. And then just start circulating it around and run it for, maybe 3 hours, and then stop, let it all settle. As soon as it settles, rack the beer off and leave those hops behind.
Okay.
Have you ever tried anything like that, Travis?
I haven't, but what if you put it in a corny keg with a modified dip tube and gave it a lot of agitation for a little while and then pulled off that shortened dip tube? Something similar? Yeah,
you could do that. Just to pick the keg up and rock it back and forth for, 3 hours. Thing is, you got to leave like a bubble of air in there, so it kind of stirs it, and not air, but CO2.
CO2, yeah.
And then just flop it back and forth. If you don't mind doing that for 3 hours, there you go.
It's like kickball with it, volleyball.
Yeah, let it settle maybe overnight, and then rack the clear beer off, and that would work too. You do it in a carboy, that's kind of what he's doing, stirring it up. But I'm not sure how much it really gets it up into solution. I bet you if that was a clear beer on there, I think Paul, if you do a clearer beer and you dry hop, send us video of that to see if the hops are really getting up in suspension, or they're all just at the bottom. What I'm imagining is all just sitting at the bottom, just kind of wiggling around on an orbital shaker. You try a stir plate. People have put carboys on stir plates too. That's a possibility. It tends to pull down in the center and push up on the sides, and that might get the hops going. So you could try that. Or pump it around. I think, people have asked about shakers and stir bars for as long as they've been invented in order to get beer to ferment faster and attenuate more, which we've said repeatedly is a bad idea. But on the dry hopping side, it may actually be a good idea. I think, maybe give that a try. So Travis, you're going to be my test brewer and test me out. You're going to make your smash beer, and then you're going to make both, and then put them both in corny kegs. And then one's just going to sit there, and the other is going to get the shaking treatment for a couple hours.
3 hours.
Right. You can get the wife to do it. It's fun. She won't mind. She won't mind. All right. Let's see here. Andreas asks about batch sparging. Says, hi, I'm preparing to brew my second batch ever of all grain. I want to batch sparge this one, but can't get my thick head around it. He's read articles and seen videos, but doesn't understand how to calculate how much water I need for both sparges and temperature for the second sparge. Please help. Thanks. The show's great. Address from Mexicali in Baja.
Oh,
I bet I know a book that will explain this process perfectly. It may or may not be on its 4th edition.
Right.
it's there. Yeah.
And there's shows. I think the simple thing on batch sparging is this: calculate it as if you were going to fly sparge the entire thing, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then just divide the water up into whatever batches you want to do. And
2 batches, yeah.
You're pretty close at that point. It's the same amount of water. It's just you're using a portion at a time. You may want to, if you're concerned about the temperature of your sparge dropping, well, then, keep the temperature of your water up that you're going to use to sparge. Should be all right.
Yeah. What have I done on batch sparging? I take the sparge water up to like the initial strike temperature for the mash, 165, something like that. Not that critical. Conversions happen. All you're doing is rinsing. And so the one thing I tell people when I talk about batch sparging is to make sure you drain the mash thoroughly, because if you only partially drain it and then fill it, you lose a lot of extract because you're diluting those runnings back through the whole mash, right, and extracting a portion of that.
Right.
So.
Right. So John,
I would agree with that.
To figure out the total volume of liquid, which is probably the most challenging part, your online version of your book, you have that calculation in there, X pounds, as much. You're going to lose so much.
It's roughly a half a quart per pound that's retained. So 10 pounds, half a quart per pound, 5 quarts, a gallon and a quarter. That's how much wort would be retained. So from your initial mash in volume, 5 quarts being retained, you get the rest of it out, double that, that amount, and sparge again with it. It's fairly easy, and there's if you do your batch sparge and you come up a little shy on your volume, then hit it with some more. Not that critical.
There you go. And I'm not really sure of the need to batch sparge. If you're already sparging, just pour water in on the top. If you don't have a fancy gear, just put it like a dinner plate on top, and just pour water with a pitcher, and just keep an inch of water on top of your mash as you drain it off, and that's fly sparging. Mm-hmm. It'll work just as well, and you just keep going until you collect the amount that you need to collect. Yeah. Just make sure you draw off slow enough, and you'll get great results.
Yeah. Right. I do try to describe it thoroughly and how to brew. So, read that chapter and email me, john@howtobrew.com if you have questions.
There you go.
So Andres was doing his second batch in 2019. Hopefully he's finished with that batch.
Yeah, I think he's probably done now.
And hopefully, however the results came out, he gave another shot, because you're going to get better and better.
Yeah.
As long as your fermentation's good, all the rest of the shit you do with the wort doesn't matter so much.
Yeah, that's true.
All right. One more short break, and we'll be back right after this.
Back to the two guys that know how to turn beer into beer. This is Brew Strong.
All right, we're back. Now, one last question before we wrap this up. This is Gary. He is asking about the big ass chiller He says, I made a big ass BA Whirlpool chiller using a lot of 5/8 inch OD copper tubing, probably 10 or 20 feet worth. Well, 10 or 20 feet, that's a big difference. That's when I drop the BA chiller into my 15-gallon keg towards the end of the boil, the copper just sucks out the heat and my boil pretty much stops. Well, one of the things you can do about that is make sure there's no water in your big ass chiller. Make sure you blow through it. Make sure it's just air in there instead of water. And then you can set it out in the sun. Let it warm up before you drop it in. That's what I used to do. If it's cold, you can take a torch to it or something like that, or put it inside the house, keep it warm. And then when you put it in, it won't be quite as much of an energy drain on your kettle, on your boil. Even if it does stop the boil, it's not that big a deal. I would push water. Let's see. I would push water from my hose to an old, smaller copper chiller that is sitting in an ice bath to the BA chiller along with the Whirlpool with decent results other than killing my boil. Well, one of the things there is instead of using a small copper chiller sitting in there, what you can do is just take a little pond pump, a little sump pump, put that in your bucket of ice water, and then use that to pump your ice water through your big ass chiller and back to the bucket. That works really well. And then you can always just keep topping it up with ice if you need more and more cooling.
Am I reading that wrong? Or is he flushing water through it while he's boiling still?
I think he's putting it in the kettle. He's getting the boil stopping. And then I think once he's got it sanitized and he's ready to stop, he goes ahead and pumps water through it at that point. I don't think he's pumping ice water through while he's trying to boil.
Good.
And I tell you, with ice water, you can get your wort down to, a couple of degrees above freezing. I'm starting back my brewing after a 4-year sabbatical and considering using the copper tubing in another way. What would be the pros and cons of using the big ass chiller as an ice bath, in an ice bath connected to my pump, sucking the wort from my keg ball valve to the BA chiller, back up to my BA Whirlpool tube, and repeat? So in other words, he's recirculating it through the chiller back into the kettle. Mm-hmm. And you can do that, but it's going to be less efficient than just whirlpooling around the big ass chiller sitting in the and you're going to have other problems. If you're going to do this, instead of doing that, I would just get myself like a Therminator, a Blickman plate chiller. And I would just use that, and I'd run the wort out through the plate chiller into whatever fermenter you have. You can run ice water across that too, and that'll work quite well. And all your wort stays nice and hot, and you're not beating up your wort with a lot of pumping around. I think the big ass chiller, the way to use it is make sure you blow any water out of it in your Whirlpool chiller before you put it in your kettle. Keep it warm. If you're brewing somewhere where it's snowing and freezing, keep it in the house. Or keep it near the fire. If you're brewing somewhere nice and warm, just put it in the sun before you put it in your kettle. And then, just pump ice water through it. That's the simplest thing. Those sump pumps are cheap. You get them off of eBay for almost nothing. I got a nice 3 liter per minute pump for $11 off of eBay. They're really strong. They'll do like 100 psi. So I have no trouble doing that. And then you just whirlpool the wort around the chiller, and it'll chill really fast. The advantage to that is, you get a nice cold break. You can have the cold break drop to the bottom of the kettle, and then you can transfer off clear wort. If you use a plate chiller like a Therminator, you're going to draw that protein and all that stuff, and your cold break's going to end up in your fermenter. then you're going to need to deal with it there. I know a lot of people are keen on keeping a lot of cold break, but I think excessive cold break is a negative on your beer stability. So there you go. That's my opinion. You heard it
Do you
here.
draw your cold break off at the brewery?
Yes, it gets left behind. Well, we tend to do a dump. It depends on the beer. It depends on what we're doing, but we tend to do a dump, and then we'll yeah. So
you dump before pitching or shortly after pitching, or?
Well, no, yeah, shortly after pitching. So the pitching occurs in line. That's the easiest time to do your pitch. I mean, we do some beers where we'll transfer dump and then we'll transfer yeast after that. I prefer the inline personally.
Mm-hmm.
You get better mixing and it's right when the word's going in. So, I mean, we do a mix of things. So probably one's not really that much more important than the other. Or we'd stick with one versus the other. I will say that I quite enjoyed this B52 Brewing Hope You Like Sabro beer. That was good. Great Sabro character and nice minty, and the package does not seem horribly oxidized like I've gotten from a number of breweries.
Had I known he was drinking it today, John, I would have sent you a can also.
It's all right.
Yeah, that's good. I like it. I will finish that pint during the next show, and then I'll move on to another beer. God knows. Oh, what sucks. I don't know. Maybe I'll tell you. It was great. I'll tell you that too. So, yeah, B52 Brewing. Hope you like Sabro. I can recommend that. I think that was actually pretty good. Pretty good indeed. 8.2%. It drinks like it's 8.2. That'd be my most negative comment about it. I don't know. I like the alcohol all hidden. Like it's like, oh, there's alcohol in this? But it's good. It's good. Well done. B52 Brewing. Who's B52 Brewing, Travis? Who are those guys?
I don't know any of the brewers, I don't think, which again is a good thing. Usually by the time I know, it's when they don't like me anymore.
Hey. Oh, it's like me. Yeah. As soon as somebody meets me, they don't like me. That's a fact. All right. Well, thank you, everyone, for listening. Make sure you support our fine sponsors, Blickman Engineering, Brew Chatter, and all the other ads that you've heard inserted after the fact. Make sure to support those guys, because what they do is they pay money, and that money goes to support the Brewing Network. So
all the electrons that make up this podcast.
All the electrons, yes. Right. Hey, how come Heritage is not getting a cut of the money for all the electricity I'm using right now? I don't know. And the beer I'll drink. It's criminal. All right. Until then, everybody, brew strong.